Hi everyone, welcome to What's Happening in Brazil. Let's start with the latest news from the country.
The Chamber of Deputies rejected President Jair Bolsonaro's veto to a bill that suspends evictions during the pandemic. Thus, actions that may dislodge people from their properties are prohibited until at least December 31. The bill had been approved in the Chamber of Deputies and Senate. Its goal is to guarantee housing to families affected by the economic crisis, which was worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Zero Eviction campaign presented a survey that shows more than 36,800 people threatened with eviction in São Paulo, the largest Brazilian city. During her testimony, the attorney who represents former doctors of the health insurance company Prevent Senior, specialized in assisting elderly people, said to Brazil's COVID inquiry that due to pressure from the company, doctors were obligated to prescribe the COVID kit to patients who had symptoms of the disease. The kit includes drugs without proven scientific efficacy to treat coronavirus infections. Besides, according to some studies, these drugs' adverse effects are extremely hazardous to people's health. Attorney Bruna Morato said that the company's professionals had no medical autonomy to decide the best treatment against the disease, and the orders were determined by the board members of Prevent Senior. The health insurance company promoted a study without any authorization. The company's idea was to save costs by adopting the COVID kit, since the not recommended drugs had lower costs than the required hospitalizations for proper treatment.
Jair Bolsonaro's presence at the UN Assembly was marked by lies and embarrassment. Among the president's main fallacies in his speech, environmental and indigenous areas preservation was one of the most aggressive. Bolsonaro's rhetoric is not consistent with reality.
In a 12-minute speech at the UN, Jair Bolsonaro exposed to the world his rhetoric already well known in Brazil about a supposed need to expand agribusiness, cattle raising, and mining in the territories claimed by indigenous people. The president nodded to his base of Brazilian supporters and used disinformation to create a parallel reality of the country's economic and social situation, in addition to sending messages to the opposition, the media, and the Supreme Court.
14% of the nation's territory, that is, more than 110 million hectares, and they want to use this land for agriculture and other activities more and more.
The first indigenous parliamentarian elected in Brazil, Federal Deputy Joênia Wapichana, refutes the evaluation Bolsonaro made. She recalls the large indigenous demonstrations that occurred in recent months in Brasília and criticizes the president's attitude towards the international audience.
And indigenous lands are strategic for Brazil to face the climate crisis in the sense of protecting the environment.
The time frame limitation thesis analyzed by the Supreme Court predicts that the indigenous people could only claim the lands they occupied before the 1988 Brazil's constitution, disregarding the groups that suffered invasions and were expelled. They also fear that the decision will bring legal risk to the lands already demarcated and that it will encourage violent conflicts. At the moment, voting is paralyzed due to a request for examination of the case records made last week by Minister Alexandre de Moraes. It has no expected date to return. Only 2 ministers have already cast their votes: Edson Fachin, who voted against the bill, and Nunes Marques, who is supportive to it. The dispute is tied in 1-1.
The longer this issue of the time frame limitation decision takes, the stronger a possible threat of rural conflicts.
Bolsonaro has been consistent with his anti-environment agenda and loyalty to the ruralists, who represent an important part of his supporters in Congress. Last week, during an event in the west of the state of Minas Gerais, he gave another taste of his intention to run the cattle through.
This new landmark not only undermines agribusiness, it also puts the food security of Brazil and of the world at risk.
For Federal Deputy Talíria Petroni, the president's strategy is a blackmail disconnected of reality. He tries to disentangle the blame for the current scenario of hunger and food insecurity from his government's economic policy.
I think it's a blackmail But it's a big lie, first and foremost because the small farmer is the one who feeds the Brazilian people. We usually say that it's the countryside doesn't plant, the city doesn't have dinner, and that's true.
This year, educator Paulo Freire would be 100 years old. His legacy continues to inspire education professionals in Brazil and throughout the world. Now, a theater play takes to the stage the humanity and knowledge of a genius of education.
Eu gosto de ser gente precisamente pela minha responsabilidade ética e política.
The patron of education in Brazil comes to life in the play Paulo Freire, The Rambler of Utopia. The show, which is online during the pandemic, was created to be presented in any space for any audience.
We call this play an act of poetry because it's not a play made for people, but an act with people. It's a theater play that dialogues with the audience all the time. It's accessible to all social classes. It can be modified according to the situation, place, people, and type of purpose of that day.
He proposes that the school be a space of dialogue, of putting oneself in the student's place, putting oneself in the worker's place, and never putting oneself above others because of higher education or postgraduate degree.
In Campinas, inner São Paulo state, Paulo Freire was the theme of the 2020 Cupinzeiro Carnival group. The idea of honoring the educator occurred because of the attacks against Paulo Freire's thoughts. To compose its samba plot, the group researched Freire's ideas in depth and ended up finding similarities with the musical education work developed by themselves.
We develop a music education work and people are inserted. They bring their experience. Those who have been there for a longer time teach those who have just arrived. This process of popular culture has a lot to do with Paulo Freire, musical culture, popular music, because that's it. It's a work of learning that places the person within the cultural context to which one belongs. You never separate them, and then learning is very powerful.
It's time for Brazilianism.
Hey guys, I'm still attached to soups and it's precisely a soup recipe that I'll prepare today. I'm gonna make a green soup, this Portuguese delight, a potato cream enriched with pepperoni sausage and finished with cabbage. There is no way you won't like it. I'll slice the pale and I'll cut the pepperoni crosswise. We have to remove the skin of both of them before cutting. We're going to remove the cabbage stalk. I will use the cabbage stalk to make the base of the green soup because first, it will give flavor and second, there is no waste. Then the texture will be very interesting. Braise the onion, the parsley, and the cabbage stalk in a lot of oil and with a generous pinch of salt. Add garlic and braise it too. Add the potatoes, mix well, then add water and cook it. When the potato is cooked, grind it all with the mixer, forming a velvety broth. Add the sausages and cook in the potato broth. When the sausages are cooked, about 10 minutes later, adjust the salt and then add kale, green onions, and freshly ground black pepper. Serve it with a generous drizzle of olive oil.
You like the show? So hit the like button and share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive notifications. We'll see you next week.